Okay, I think we're live, everybody. I'm Rachel Rollins, the District Attorney of Suffolk County. I am excited you guys are joining me for the second of four-part series in February Black History Month that we have entitled Black Excellence. Last week, we were meeting with some very young and new and vibrant leaders. We still have some young and new and vibrant people in front of us, but this is, I think, a group of individuals that have arrived already and are changing the scene of activism and community involvement in Boston. So I am going to introduce all four, and then we're going to have I hope, free-flowing discussion where we ask them some important questions about where we find ourselves right now. So the first person I'm going to introduce is Sheena Collier. Sheena is a super connector, a convener and a planner with over 15 years of experience in community organizing, partnership building, strategic event planning, and program development. As founder and CEO of the Collier Connection, TCC, she designs innovative diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives and events to help companies engage employees, customers, and suppliers of color. Welcome, Sheena. Our next fabulous guest is Beth Chandler. Beth joined YW Boston in November of 2012 with more than 20 years of experience in both the corporate and nonprofit sectors. In August 2018, Beth was appointed president and CEO. Her breadth of experience encompasses program development, delivery and evaluation, business development, and operations. As president and CEO of YW Boston, she leads the organization as it strives to build more inclusive environments in the city of Boston through a variety of DE&I, diversity, equity, and inclusion services, youth programming, events, and advocacy work. Welcome, Beth. Mazwadi Hanks is a youth program coordinator. He is originally from upstate New York and currently lives in Chelsea, which is part of Suffolk County, with his beautiful wife and two sons. He has worked with youth in the Boston area for over 10 years. Mazwadi would describe himself as being driven and a hardworking person who loves mentoring, motivating, and inspiring young people. Welcome, Mazwadi. And last but certainly not least is the Reverend Willie Boderick. Will is the second. He is the senior pastor of the historic 12th Baptist Church in the Roxbury neighborhood of Boston. He was born and raised in Atlanta, Georgia, and graduated from Georgetown University with a Bachelor of Arts degree, double major in English and sociology. He also graduated in 2014 with a Master of Divinity degree from Harvard Divinity School. And most recently, the Reverend graduated with a JD from my alma mater, Northeastern University School of Law, in the class of 2020. He currently works as a lawyer at Brown Rudnick LLP, and happens to be a member of Omega Sci-Fi, which he loves talking about. We are not bringing that up today, Willie. Okay, but welcome. So let's see whether we can open this up. Can everyone hear me?
We hear you.
We're good now.
You guys good. All right. So let's start with the first question. If we could start with Mazwadi, walk us through, if you can, what the passions were that got you to the current job that you have right now. We know that you work in Charlestown with youth. Tell us what in your life experience got you to this job.
Yeah, sure. I think you have to go back to when I was a very young adult, early 20s. I already had a son. I was coming into manhood, trying to figure out my place as a Black man in the world, while also trying to, quote unquote, keep it real, not sell out. That led me to street pharmaceuticals. I felt like that was going to give me the financial freedom, the physical freedom to kind of do what I want and when I want and create the life that I had imagined for myself and my family, which was growing at the time. Needless to say, that's a game that you can never win. And I ended up incarcerated. And while I was there, I was just shocked and surprised and saddened by the number of babies in there. And I don't know if, I'm from New York, but I don't know if in Massachusetts, the age, the juvenile age went up to 18, but it was a large number of 17-year-olds in South Bay with me, and looking at, you know, big time numbers and years. And I just couldn't wrap my head around. And these were, I have a 17-year-old now, and he's like, he's a baby, you know, and I couldn't believe these kids are in here with grown men, you know, criminals, some hardened criminals. So, you know, that's when I found spirituality, and I kind of made a deal with my God that, and I said, listen, if you allow me to get out of this situation, I will dedicate my life to working with young people, making sure they don't make the same mistakes I did, one, but also keeping them out of the adult system. And as you know, DA Rollins, once you're in that system, it's so hard to, one, get out of it, stay out of it, and create a life after it. You know, I feel like, you know, the way the law is set up, it's meant to keep people that look like us in the system. So that honestly just really led me to the career path I'm on now. You know, I started volunteering at Boys and Girls Club, started applying for jobs, was not getting jobs because of my Corey, and just time, perseverance, diligence. I was able to land a youth program coordinator job and really just built my name from there. And at the current position I'm at right now at Charlestown Coalition, which is part of the Center for Community Health and Improvement at MGH, they recruited me for that, which, you know, I was happy for. And honestly, we're trying to be a model for every youth program in the city, in the state. And, you know, I love going to work every day. I love the kids I work with. But yeah, that's where my passion comes from and where it lies.
So you would say, Mzwadi, a lived experience had a lot to do with where you find yourself now. And my assumption, and certainly we work with you quite a bit in Suffolk County with the Charlestown Coalition, that is something that gives you credibility, would you say, with some of the young people that you come into contact with?
Totally. And I wouldn't just say credibility, but it gives me, because I think credibility can only get you so far. It gives me the true life experience and trial and error that I can tell the kids, look, I did what you're doing, and this is what happened. I've been in that situation. Part of the, you know, selling drugs and the collateral damage from that was I became addicted to opiates. At the time, OxyContin was a new thing on the streets, and, you know, you would, you know, take a couple to party. Next thing you know, you need them to function. And that led to years and years and years and ruined relationships. And, you know, so we do a lot of work with substance use in the community as well. And yes, that life experience not only gives me the credibility, but also gives me the tried answers, true answers that I can give these young people and sometimes older people to make sure they learn from my mistakes.
Okay, guys, I think we're having a little bit of technical difficulties. Can you guys hear me now?
Yes.
Yep, we can hear you.
All right. I want to make sure. So, Mzwadi, I know you might have gotten cut off. I want to make sure that I'm jumping to Beth. Beth, you work at the YW. Why don't you tell us what brought you there back in 2012 and how your current role is different, right? As an entry or mid-level back in 2012, and now as the president and CEO of this wonderful organization. If you could tell us a little bit about the organization, how you got there.
Sure. So a little bit about YW Boston. We're part of the YWCA system. The mission of every YWCA is to eliminate racism, empower women, and promote peace, justice, freedom, and dignity for all. And what drew me to the organization almost 9 years ago now was that it wasn't kumbaya, but they really wanted to talk about systemic issues and how do we get at systemic issues around race and gender to really make change and really get to equity. A lot of the other nonprofits I worked for were wonderful organizations, but they exist in part because of structural racism, right? White supremacy, that's why they exist. And so I was really drawn to the idea of how do we eradicate that so we get rid of all the other things. And I think, another part for me was my lived experience in that I felt for, 50 years that something was wrong with me, right? I wasn't able to, quite get to the next level. And it was because I needed more training. I needed more this. I mean, I went to Harvard undergrad. I went to MBA at Columbia for my MBA. Like, what more did I need? Always kept coming back to, there was something wrong with me. I remember my first job out of business school. I was working for an investment bank, and the manager brought me into his office, and I thought, this is the moment I get the, I'm going to be told what I need to do, the kind of work, the skills I need to show. And the conversation was about what I needed, how I needed to dress, how my hair needed to be. And all of it was very, Eurocentric, right? And when I looked around, there was no one that looked like me that was in a leadership position. And so I knew I was not going very far. So a couple of years ago, almost 4 now, we went through a strategic planning process because at that time we had 6 programs doing 6 different things. And we said, what are the issues here in Boston when you look at the intersection of race and gender in particular? And what can we do to make a difference? And what really resonated for me, and I think the rest of the leadership team, was, we don't want to create programming that's telling women, that's telling people of color that there's something wrong with you, right? There's a deficit-based thing, and we're going to do some training to make you fit someplace. We want to go into organizations and say, there's something wrong with you. You need to change to be more inclusive. It's not anything wrong with the other folks. And so that's what we do. We go into organizations and we say, hey, look, white supremacy exists. It exists here. That's really not anything to have a conversation about. Let's figure out how it does so that everybody can be successful. And so that's what we do. And that's what's really drawn me to this organization. Is it's not about saying there's something wrong with women, there's something wrong with people of color. It's there's something wrong with organizations, and let's fix that so that everybody can be successful.
I love it, Beth. And Sheena, you go into organizations as well. Can you talk to me about, and I promise they're wonderful. Beth, are you from Boston originally? Because all of you wonderful people were born somewhere else and came here, but we're going to keep you here, we promise. But
so I grew up in Connecticut.
See, I mean, man, proving my point. Excellence. But all New England sort of tri-state area people. Okay. Sheena, I know you came here and saw a deficit in Boston, right? But can you walk us through how TCC was created? Number one, and number two, what you do when you go into companies. And then we're going to go to the revenue.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so I am off from Albany, New York. And kind of to your point, one of the things that I've been here now almost 2 decades, and think that Boston has amazing Black talent that comes here all the time, but doesn't do a good job of keeping folks. And so that's really what my work is focused on. For myself, I grew up in a mostly Black neighborhood, went to mostly Black schools, lower to middle income neighborhood, had very engaged parents and community that supported me. I had the opportunity to leave home at 17 and go to Spelman, and it was my first time away from home, my first time having exposure to Black people across a wide spectrum of class. And then I moved here to go to grad school at Harvard and had a very major culture shock. It was my first time in the minority. I couldn't wait to get out of the Boston area, but fast forward 2 decades and I'm still here. And initially through the Collier Connection, which is the entity through which I, as you mentioned, work with companies, organizations, universities to really better engage communities of color. What I saw was a lot of DEI efforts happening, a lot of conversation. Around the time I started it is when a lot of reports were coming out around Boston, around our growing wealth gap, the income inequality. At that time, we were the #1 city for income inequality, and a lot of people scrambling to figure out what to do about it. And I went to school for education, but at that time happened to make a career change and go to the Greater Boston Chamber of Commerce and start to work with the private sector on, what is the role of the business community in closing the racial wealth gap in Boston. And through buying more goods, products, and services from communities of color, from hiring from more communities of color, and really cultivating talent. And so I've done that for the last couple of years of really helping a lot of the major corporations in Boston figure out how they really live out the statements that they put out, and how do they really operationalize their diversity, equity, inclusion plans, and essentially put their dollars kind of where they say their values are, to really do more around cultivating Black talent in particular, in buying from Black suppliers. And after doing that for a number of years, as well as in my side life, throwing parties and doing events around the city, trying to activate spaces in Boston, making sure that Black people feel comfortable, not just in the neighborhoods where we mostly live, but at the MFA and in Fenway. And so I was doing a number of events around the city and decided to start Boston While Black, which is this membership community to really create these spaces of belonging for Black people, push the business community to recognize the importance of creating space for Black voices and investing in Black talent, and even push the city and the region on investing more in culture, placemaking, and economic revitalization that really centers the experiences of Black people.
I love it. All right, excellent. So Reverend, you are the senior pastor at the historic 12th Baptist Church, but you're also a lawyer by trade. Mm-hmm. You are frequently seen, or I see you, as a high-level consultant in many political campaigns on the federal, state, and local side. You have been instrumental in criminal justice reform. Can you walk us through all of the hats that you currently wear, and how all of that is right? It's not 7 different siloed things, the sort of concentric circles where all of the things you do are interconnected. If you could take a few moments to walk us through that.
Yeah, well, thank you, D.A. Rollins, for having me, and thank you to this esteemed panel. I feel humbled just to be on this panel with each and every one of you. So let's jump right into it. For me, the first thing that drives everything that I do is my faith. What undergirds the various hats that I wear. People see it as various hats, but it springs from one flowing river of faith and the consistency of justice. One of my guiding scriptures in my life is Micah 6:8. What does the Lord require of you? It says to do justice and to love mercy and to walk humbly before God. And I think you can do that in every space you enter in. And then I lean deeply on the gospel, which says, when I was hungry, did you feed me? When I was thirsty, did you give me drink? When I was naked, did you clothe me? When I was sick, did you come and help me? When I was in prison, did you come visit me? And those are various hats that can be worn in everything we do. And I think that call to my tradition, the Christian tradition, calls us to do work in those capacities. The next thing that really drove me beyond my faith was my parents. I really got to see my parents really do work in the community. I always tell a narrative. My father's a pastor. I'm the oldest of 3 sons, and my mother's an educator. She's a public school educator for over 30 years, and I watched them work very closely together. My dad also was a career counselor at the Atlanta Job Corps Center. And what was so interesting was being a public school educator, there were kids that fell through the cracks, there was leakage in our systems, as we all know happens, particularly in our systems, and the interconnectedness. But I also saw my parents be able to weave what I would call safety nets, where when a young person was about to transition out of a public school, they could go straight to my dad because my mom knew exactly where they were going and get them an opportunity, get them a job. And I started to see this, what I call this underground network of protection, this underground network of safety for our community. And so my framework for how I approach doing this work is being able to find the nexus between institutions that usually don't speak to one another, being able to make sure that our healthcare professionals, our legal professionals, our educators are coming together and figuring out where is it do we need to create more connectivity. And I think that's what really we're trying to do. I think that's what everybody is doing on this platform in some way, form, or fashion, is trying to eliminate the leakage and trying to reimagine systems so that we all can be liberated, we all can be free. And that really guided me. That's what brought me to Boston. I was looking for deeper meaning in my life. I'm a former collegiate athlete, and went on and I pledged Omega and all those great things. And I enjoyed.
It only took 2 minutes for Omega Psi Phi to come up. I was waiting.
But
Timing. Go ahead.
I was going to follow my mother's footsteps in education, and I don't feel like I left that, but I was able to expand that scope. And when I got to Harvard Divinity School, I literally dove right into Boston. I didn't know anybody. I knew no one here except for one person who let me sleep on their couch until my apartment in Brighton got ready, because I didn't even know where to live. And so I stayed in Brighton for a year and a half, and then I moved to Roxbury, and I dove right into this community, which I love. It reminded me of home. It reminded me of Southeast, where I worked in DC. It reminded me of Southwest Atlanta. And the thing for me is to continue to do the work, to deeply engage. I was blessed to do my field study at 12th Baptist Church 8 years ago, and 9 years ago now at 12th Baptist Church. And I've risen from a field study intern to the senior pastor position. And so it shows you that, if you commit to this community, commit to these institutions, I've been blessed to do so many different things in Massachusetts, whether it's been policy, whether it's been through politics, whether it's worked at the Attorney General's office on various campaigns. But I think the biggest thing for me is this concept of justice and what is required of us so that all of our people might continue to have opportunity, access, and live viable lives. And I think that's what drives me. That's what continues to keep me engaged, to fight those good fights, and to work with great people like those who are on this panel, and particularly our district attorney. Yeah.
Excellent. I love it. Beth, do you work exclusively with women and girls and those issues? I was on a panel earlier today, and we've unfortunately had 7 homicides in Suffolk County. 2 of them are women, right? I think one of, again, I want to not only talk about the criminal legal system, but much of the reckoning we find ourselves in as a nation in this moment has to do with, of course, certain communities finally, warp speeding forward to where other communities have been for a very long time, when we've seen well before a George Floyd, well before an Ahmaud Arbery, well before a Breonna Taylor, but they are right now catching up. Can you tell us, first and foremost, YW works exclusively with girls and women? Is that accurate?
No, we don't, actually.
See? We're learning something new, right? So tell us.
We work with any organization, cross-sector, and we work with everybody, right?
Okay.
And so we're going into organizations, working with everybody in that organization, because that's how you're going to get to change, right? And so the ultimate beneficiary for us is, we believe that women of color, if they benefit, everybody benefits. Right? But we want to talk about what's going on within your organization that's keeping people out. So how do you think about change at the individual level, the cultural level of the organization, and then policies and practices, and what's happening because you're seeing inequality and inequity in your institutions?
Right.
And if we can help you get that, it's always going to benefit women of color, right? But everybody's going to benefit. And that's the beauty of it. Right? This is all ships rise. There's no, you feed the top and you hope there's some kibbles and bits for everybody else. This is everybody rises when the people that are getting the least are brought up, right? That's what this is about. And so we work.
So what I want to make sure. So thank you for that explanation. I want to make sure we talk about, when I mentioned with the Reverend political campaigns, nothing is easy, right? So certainly if you have to go to an Amazon, you have to go to a GE, you have to talk to them about the systemic, barriers or multiple types of barriers they might have to diversifying their work staff, or whether that's you, Beth, or Sheila, or others on the panel that are going to be involved in that. When I think about running for office, and remember, like 2 summers ago, there were all these people that, campaigning while Black. You're on your phone with a Vote Builder app, looking not to break into a house, but to see on your app, which of these apartments is the one on this map here that I'm supposed to ring the bell and say, hi, I'm running for this. And people were calling the police on you. How are you guys, and Sheena, I'm going to go to you next. How are you guys dealing with not just the brick and mortar structural companies, right? Where you can go to Bank of America, you can meet with State Street, you can hopefully even come to the government with the Governor Baker or myself. How are you working on the bigger issues where, as a community, as a nation, as as a country, we are so broken, and it is so ingrained, even in us as Black people, right? Like, we were raised on these same racist cartoons. And, you know, again, I went back, I'm older than all of you, but I was watching Hong Kong Phooey the other day and was like, I can't even watch this, right? Like, the things, Dukes of Hazzard, which, you know, as a child, I'm like, this is my favorite. And then I look back and I'm like, that's the Confederate flag. Like, I mean, so just, we have it, all of us need to change. How do you think bigger than just the brick and mortar?
And I can share one thing that we're doing.
Yeah.
So we started last year with getting legislation filed called the Parity on Boards Bill, where the legislation require that no Massachusetts board or commission have more than 50% plus one of any gender, at a minimum that racial and ethnic representation mirrors that of the state, and that a targeted effort be made to ensure that women of color aren't left out. Because we know that efforts that focus on women benefit white women, efforts that focus on people of color benefit men of color, and women of color get left out. And so all of that.
Can you say that again for the people in the back, Beth, please? And I'm sorry, go ahead. Yeah, no, I hear you. That is phenomenal.
Yeah. And so that is legislation that we had Rep. Haddad and Senator Lewis filed the last time. We didn't get it through, so it's being refiled again, and we really want to get it across the finish line this year, because part of that is saying that there are lots of boards and commissions here in the state that are making decisions that impact the lives of everybody, but not everybody's on those boards and commissions, right?
Sure.
So they're going to make better decisions. They're going to really be able to think about all the communities that they're making decisions for if those folks are represented. So we're really pushing the education around that so people know how to apply and send their information for boards and commissions, as well as getting it in the legislation so that, you know, the governor actually is doing a fairly good job, particularly with women, not as well as people of color. But, you know, we don't want there to be steps that go backwards. So if we can get it in the legislation, that will help cement that we don't go backwards, right? And hopefully help us continue to move forward. But that's part of it for us, is thinking about outside of organizations, where can we really push to try to make sure we're getting, you know, representation, and not just representation, you know, real inclusion and voices being heard in different perspectives, so that everybody is being heard and their opinions are being valued.
Mazwadi, how do you, Charles, so as the DA of Suffolk County, everyone from Boston, of course, thinks Suffolk County is only Boston. And I am fully aware that Charlestown is part of Boston, but Chelsea, Winthrop, and Revere are part of Suffolk County, right? Mm-hmm. And Boston has over 20 very distinct neighborhoods, right? Mm-hmm. Roxbury is not the same as West Roxbury, right? Like, so, you know, how do you meet the needs of your community in Charlestown, which, you know, for those of us who were born and raised here, we think of Charlestown maybe as the way I thought of it in The Town, right? The movie, which good movie, right? Ben Affleck, but segregated, right? Townies as opposed to new people coming in, very huge wealth disparities in Charlestown. Walk us through some of the issues Charlestown has and how they are the same as Boston kind of writ large, and how they are different, and what the Charlestown Coalition does to make sure you're meeting the needs of your community.
Right. So I think exactly what you said. Charlestown is very unique in the fact that we have the largest housing development in New England with over 1,100 units. It's actually we're in the process of a redevelopment right now, which is going to add another 1,000 units on. You will have market rate. It will be mixed income, but you still have this, vast amount of poverty. And then you have the highest average household income of any neighborhood in Boston, in Charlestown. So you've got this humongous wealth disparity. And me not being from Boston, what I had known of Charlestown was, busing, racial tension. When I did come to Charlestown, I learned about the Irish American generations that had been there, for so long. And like you said, they were called townies. One of the things that we really push in our organization at Charlestown Coalition, especially since I came on 2 years ago, is equity, unity. bridging the two Charlestowns together. So we do a lot of programming, especially the one that I'm most proud of, in concert with City Councilor Lydia Edwards. We do a monthly race dialogue. And as you know, DA Rollins, we work with people from your office, Kara Hayes with restorative justice, and we've really taken restorative justice practice to introduce members of the community to each other, and in a space otherwise that people would not connect. Conversation and topics we talk about, including race, help foster an understanding of one another. Especially with my youth program, not only are youth stigmatized, right, but youth of color are stigmatized. So one of the things I do with my youth program, we do like a selfie scavenger hunt. And I know it sounds cheesy, but there's a method to my madness where, I'll say, take a selfie with someone wearing a red sweater, take a selfie with a woman pushing a child in a stroller, take a selfie with someone riding a bike. And I have the kids wearing our Turn It Around branded, hoodies or T-shirts.
Oh, I have 3 of those that I wear all the time. That's right.
I got on you one time. You weren't wearing it, and I said, "Where's the Turn Around hoodie?" But so my favorite part is seeing the smiles on the people that live in the older people in Charlestown's faces. 9 out of 10 times they don't look like the youth I work with, but the fact that they're seeing, oh, wow, this is a nice kid. He's not a thug because he's wearing a hoodie. She's not ghetto because she doesn't look like my daughter. And we're seeing we're slowly but surely able to find understanding as humans and really get past this, levels of race and wealth and class. And listen, it's not perfect. Nowhere is perfect. But I think that, and also working with City Councilor Edwards and really our social media, putting that out there to the rest of Boston, I think people are really starting to see Charlestown as having people that look like Roxbury youth programs, look like Dorchester youth programs, where the perception before was always, Irish townies, like you said, from the town, the movie. So I'm really proud of the stuff we're doing to really bridge the gap of kind of disparities in Charlestown, but also put out the real face of Charlestown to the rest of Boston.
Yeah, I love it. Sheena, when we talked a little bit about me trying to kind of delve into campaigning, it's the closest thing I've ever done to a startup, right? I know that sounds weird, but it is, right? It's one day you wake up. I mean, not if you're Willie or Beth or Mizwati or you, but I woke up and was like, I'm going to run for office. And I used to think I was a great American because I voted. And then I realized, oh my God, that's rung 1 on a 25 rung ladder. Like, I am just the bare level meeting the minimum requirements of me being a citizen here. But it is like, you have to, I one day said, I'm going to do this. And then I spoke to my best friend and said, I'm going to do this. And she said, okay, well, I'll be your campaign manager. And then, you don't all of a sudden blink and there's, a fax, I'm old, fax machine, phones, photocopier, space that you have your campaign headquarters. You got to do it all alone. How did you decide to go out alone? I know you work for the Greater Boston Chamber of Commerce. I know you've had brick and mortar jobs where you didn't have to worry about, your own health insurance and all this other stuff. What is inside of you? Because that is a risk. Mm-hmm. What is inside of you? Where do you think you get that ability to step out and say, no, I'm investing in me. And this idea is a good one. And I am willing to, let go of this rope as I swing to grab that one. Because, most people have 2 hands on this rope, 2 hands on that one until they let go of the other. Yeah. Walk us through where that power comes inside of you.
Yeah. Well, first, I just want to say shout out to our brother here, because Charlestown was the first place I worked in Boston, and it's what solidified the fact that I didn't want to be here. So I'm glad that you're doing that work, because I had an internship there. I worked at the Harvard Kent School and at the Boys and Girls Club, and the kids, it was my first time interacting with lower income white kids, and they were like ma'am, you need to go. So that was, so I'm glad to hear you're doing that, because it really, to me, was like, oh yeah, this is exactly what I saw in the movies. That's why I don't want to be in Boston. As far as becoming an entrepreneur, I mean, a couple of things. I think that in retrospect, I have always been one. There's a term now, intrapreneur, when people are talking about people inside of companies. I always, probably with the exception of one job, I was the first person in every role that I've had. I loved creating what a role looked like, and shaping it. And I always just wanted to be the first person to really, implement something at a company, any kind of initiative or anything. And so, but I actually thought people that were entrepreneurial were crazy. I had a boyfriend when I was younger, who was very entrepreneurial. And I was like, I got to get rid of this dude. He's not stable. Like, he always has a different idea.
I know. Yeah, I love it. Okay.
I was very like, now I understand what he was doing. But back then I was like, no, I was taught, and my parents, it came a lot from my parents. My parents started their careers at the state of New York and retired from the state of New York.
Yep.
And they were like, that's what you do. You go to school, you get a job. State of New York had great benefits. I grew up with great benefits, and like, you just have that steady job. And that's what I believed. I got my master's in education. I decided when I was 6 that I was going to do that. So that's how most of my life was. I think what brought me to this place, though, when it's, something needs to be solved and you're waiting for someone to solve it, and then realize like, it's on me. Like, that's the reason why I can see this so clearly, is because it's on me. And I decided, it's something that I had to do. I did try to hold on to multiple ropes for a while. Like, Collier Connection was my side hustle for years. But in 2018, the end of 2018, my father passed away. And that is actually what gave me the courage to jump, because though he was much older, a lot of the conversation with him was about regrets. Like, I was there, I was in the hospital with him his last 2 weeks of life. And I saw how much he regretted things he hadn't said to people. He could have achieved more in life and kind of didn't. He just kind of settled. And I was like, nah, like, I need to do this now, while I have the opportunity to do it. And so I came back to work, and about a month later, they were ready to give me a promotion.
Chucked the deuces and flung, like, made it rain with the resignation letter and walked out the door. I hear you.
I actually was able to like create a relationship. I still consult for the chamber, and I'm actually on the board now.
Amazing. You're amazing.
To create this relationship, but I did come back and say, you know what, this isn't for me, this pathway of like growing in leadership here. I have to go out and do this thing. To the question you asked earlier that Beth had asked, to restate something Beth said a couple times, I really believe that once Black people are free, everybody will be free. Yeah. And so I kind of serve as this bridge now between two worlds. I do this work through Collier Connection, where I'm working with very white institutions and in doing this work of not just changing people's hearts and minds, changing people's hearts and minds, but really their behaviors and practices. But I focus most of my time on Black people and fortifying us, because I think that the hearts and minds work is long-term. And there are people that go to school for diversity, equity, inclusion, and really study that and are experts, and I commend them. I think my strength is more so in making sure Black people understand their power, and are able to activate our own networks and do the work that we're here to do. And, I serve as a bridge between those two worlds, but that's really where I mostly focus. And I love doing it. And I feel like that's what I'm here to do. And so, it's hard not getting a steady paycheck, but I'm a hustler. So I actually like having to go out and get.
I love it. I think that is great. Willie, you work in an institution that is ingrained. It is centuries old. I have had the pleasure of sitting in a church, hearing you speak to generations of people. And you are, I think, very similar to me, trying to open the eyes of some people about who we are as a community. That, I have heard you myself say that it is imperative that the church is not overtly making sure that people are not involved in loving and getting love from the church based on who they love, and the care that you give not only to the individuals that have been in the church for decades, right? Not centuries, but decades, as well as opening the door to others. I think you balance that very, very well. I am more of a roundhouse Chuck Norris, kick the door off the hinges with respect to the criminal justice system, and that's fine. And I that is who I am. Can you walk us through the changes you think you've implemented within the church, and how you are making sure that they are still deeply involved in the community, but inclusive in ways they haven't been in the past?
Yeah, well, it's a big question, because when you are a church who traces history 215 years, you've gone through various intervals of change. 12th Baptist Church was known. This is Black History Month, so I'll do some teaching today. 12th Baptist Church was the oldest direct descendant of the first African Meeting House, 1805, Thomas Paul. And so we're talking coming out of, a post-revolutionary era, the impact of, the Black burgeoning community here in this city, dealing with many of the issues that we were talking about now, lack of access, lack of opportunity, lack of equity, and being a part of an institution that was a part of the kind of foundational institutions for Black life in Boston has been such a beautiful thing. I think a big part of understanding where we're going is knowing from whence we've come. We celebrate, the Reverend Leonard Grimes, because during that time we were considered the fugitive slave church. And so when we talk about all these folks moving to Boston, this isn't a new thing for us in this city to be a hub for Black folks who have come to this particular community and have sought refuge. But the reality of the church is that we've continued to evolve. What's always spurred this type of, I think, radical step towards protecting Black folk and continue to utilize the radical ethic of love and justice is to make sure that we're rooting everything we do in an ethic of compassion. So for me, a big part of how I can't just Chuck Norris everybody in church, I never will choose to, but I do believe meeting people where they are is a huge piece of this. Understanding that the gospel is not rooted in the four walls, but actually the gospel started by this brother named Jesus walking by the sides of the water in Galilee and reaching out to people right where they are and utilizing the gifts, the talents, and the skills that they have to be used for the gospel work. And that really shapes and frames how I see the world, how I approach everything, is that there's no one that can't be used, that by God, there's no one that doesn't have purpose in our community. And I think that's how we have to really change perspective. How do we see one another? How do we see those who we even might see as the other? And I think, in this particular season, I think, we needed as an institution to be present. A big part of what we've done during this season of COVID, we know, all these people on this panel know the deep disparities that have been in our community that have been present throughout generations. These aren't new issues, right? The lack of equity and opportunity in our communities aren't new. But situations like COVID ripped the Band-Aid off of those pre-existing conditions that were already there, and we needed to be present. I was so excited during this time that we were able to step in the gap. We've been blessed to give over $250,000 as a community, not only to Warren Gardens, not only to OP, but also to the organizations that don't get the funding traditionally. We were able to help 12, 13 organizations who usually get overlooked when the city or the state is doing their funding. And those are the people that are touching the ground, that are doing the work. On Saturday, we're going to be having another event in the community, handing out masks, and we're going to be partnering with Java with Jimmy and with Spark and all these different community persons, because what I see the church as being is a liberative institution. I believe that's what the gospel is all about. A part of what I'm trying to institute is this notion of love, light, life, and liberation, which has a scriptural foundation for me, but it's to liberate all of God's people through the love of Jesus Christ. And so what I am hoping that we're able to do, no matter where we are situated, we're able to bring about that liberation. And I think that is the undercurrent of Black History Month. That's the undercurrent of our history in this country. We've always been crying a liberation song. We've always been able to sing a song in a strange land because we've always known that freedom is a ethic of who we are and what we desire. And I think what we've been trying to do is to tell everybody else about this freedom that we know always has existed, particularly in our tradition and our faith. And so my goal in the ministry work is to continue to partner. I think partnering helps us to see people beyond the frameworks of our institution. Church can be very insular, but the beautiful thing that we've learned is that there's so many people that we can touch during this virtual platform. We've been able to touch thousands of people. I've gotten letters from as far as London watching our services on Sundays. Tune in on 1045. We love to have you on Facebook and YouTube. This is a very shameless plug.
Right.
but no, I say that seriously because we believe that we're doing the work that is necessary. And I believe that we all can find healing. I've been encouraged by each and every narrative I've heard because what it's told me is that in the midst of trials, we still can see opportunity for triumph. And so I'm encouraged by this. I think what we're going to continue to do. Last night, we had a COVID talk back. I encourage you to go check it out about the vaccine because so many people were worried about that. I started this thing called Fireside Chats in my church, and it's really to talk really about the issues that go beyond just what happens in church. What I know about ministry is that people have to come to church, but then they go back into the real world after service. And so we want to deal with the issues that are affecting our congregation, our community, our country. And I'm looking forward to having D.A. Rollins on there, looking forward to having everybody on this panel on that Fireside Chat platform to inform our church, but our community about how we can better do the connectivity work, which I think everyone's talking about, closing the chasms that have separated us so that we can bring about that cura personalis, that healing the whole person. And I consider the same notion goes for healing our community. It's going to come through us coming together, seeing one another and working with one another.
So what I'm going to do is a lightning round now, which you guys are not ready for. And as Mazwadi, we're going to start with you. 3 questions. You get 15 seconds to answer each. Beth, get ready. You're next. Okay. So if I asked you, what is your superpower? What would you say?
My superpower is the ability to connect, I think, with pretty much anyone, white, black, young, old, rich, poor. I think I've had a lot of experiences in my life that I can relate to anyone you throw at me.
I love it. What are you afraid of?
Because it's happened before, I'm afraid of being without my family. Worst feeling in the world. Yeah.
What is on repeat on your playlist right now? And don't lie to me. I have subpoena power and we will get a grand jury opened. What is on repeat? What do you listen to right now when you are trying to get up or trying to get down, right? Like relaxing and amped up.
Yeah, literally. I know you say you're older than us, so I just had a birthday yesterday. I'm 44, so I would say you don't look a day older than 34. So I doubt you're older than me, but I've been listening to a lot of old school R&B. So Jodeci was playing a lot the other day, and honestly, Jodeci and Bob Marley because Bob Marley's birthday was on the 6th. So they had on Tidal, they did a playlist for him.
Love it.
Yeah,
Legend, one of the best albums ever. All right, Beth, if asked, what is your superpower?
I would say calm. That it is hard to get me ruffled.
I love it. All right. And what are you afraid of?
Ooh, spiders.
I knew you were going to say that.
Right. And I'd say that the second thing, though, is my kids. Yeah. 2 brown kids, and I've got a son that just turned 14, and I wear that fear every day.
Yeah, I hear you. And what is on repeat in your earbuds when you either mellow out or you're calm all the time? So what do you listen to no matter what you're feeling? What's your go-to?
So I do Pandora, and that's and I put Kirk Franklin. So I have a Kirk station.
Yes.
That's what I listen to most often. And then Aretha would probably be the second thing.
Amazing. She's phenomenal. All right.
And I'm
Sheena,
going to
tell
say,
me-
Rachel, you don't look older than 30 because I want to make sure I get an invite to the barbecue.
Oh my God. No, guys, I'm about to be 50 on March 3rd, which I'm like, Lord, give me strength. But all right,
That's awesome.
Sheena, what is your superpower, Sheena, and why?
Yeah, I would say connecting as well, and I guess I go a little further with it. I think the ability to see people, like I see people for who they are, and I give people space to be themselves and figure out how to activate the best parts of them.
I love it. And what are you afraid of? Either spiders or just what brings you fear or anxiety in your life right now?
Yeah, I think on a macro level, like I'm afraid of Black people not being able to be happy and experience and really have joy. You know, like I think we have so much stuff that we worry about, understandably. And I focus on being happy and creating spaces for joy, but I worry that so many people are not able to experience that.
Mm. What is on repeat in your earbuds to get you up and then to just mellow out?
Yeah. So I'm like a DJ / drummer / rapper. So I have a lot. But I'll say to mellow out on Spotify, there's this playlist called Meditations for Black Girls.
Mm.
So I put that on shuffle. When I'm feeling myself, probably Win by J-Rock.
I love it. I got it. All right. I can feel it. All right. Reverend, tell me, what is your superpower?
My superpower is I'm very optimistic and I'm visionary. I think that keeps me, and I love people. So that I think that I meet no strangers. Those are my superpowers.
I love it. What are you afraid of? What I know you have a beautiful family as well, a young, gorgeous, soon to be Omega Psi member son. But tell me what brings you fear? What brings you fear?
What brings me fear? No, I think I never want to disappoint my family, but I think my biggest fear is that I do something against my calling, and that I transgress my calling and my commitment to God. That is my biggest fear. I'm fearful of losing whatever the anointing that I feel God has gifted me with.
Yeah, like Masbati. And what's on repeat for you? What do you? And I know you're going to say some godly, music, but I know it's 2 Chainz or something other than that. Go ahead.
I love rap. I love hip hop. I start my day every day with Richard Smallwood, which the song is "Great Is Thy Faithfulness" that he plays on this as a piano. But when I mellow out, it's jazz. I love Coltrane.
Nice.
Another brother named Braxton Cook. I love Braxton Cook. Check out Braxton. He's doing amazing work. I love, listening to any type of like jazz, cool jazz. I grew up playing saxophone and singing. So that's something that relaxes me. I
love it. Look at this. All right, Maswati, if you could ask one other panelist a question, now that you've sat with them for close to an hour, what would it be? And do it. And they will answer.
So it's funny. My brother Willie, his life or his upbringing mirrors mine eerily. So I'm the oldest of 3 sons.
Wow.
My mother was a public school educator as well. My father is, my best friend, my role model. Even though I strayed from my parents' teachings, the reason I was able to so seamlessly kind of get back into, mentoring and the positivity and youth coaching and whatnot was because of the relationship and the upbringing I had, especially from my father. So I think my question to you is one, because I don't know, I just met you, and I heard Rachel say that your son was, going to school soon. So I have 2 sons, one 22 next month and one 17.
Wow.
So do you have kids? What are their ages? And what's the best advice that you've ever given any of your children?
Well, my son's 1.5. He'll be 2 in July.
Oh, okay.
So the best advice is take that out your mouth. Is the best.
It's good advice. It's good advice. I'll tell you that.
He has the remote or something. I was like, man, stop biting on that. But since one, I appreciate that. I'm glad that and I look forward to building with you because I think I don't mind coming across the bridge when it's safe to make sure we build. I think the best advice I give anybody though is to don't allow people to box you into a space where you no longer see yourself. And something I think many of us go through, particularly when we're in unfamiliar territories, and we allow people to restrict who we are and where we can be and what we can do. And so I tell people to be radically themselves. And I think the path usually creates a space for you if you make sure you don't restrict yourself for others.
I love it. All right, Beth, I'm going to ask you the same thing. If you could ask one other panelist a question, what would that be?
I'm going to go to Maswati because I've got a 14-year-old that I shared, my son, who's the eldest. And, you know, what advice would you give a young Black man?
You know what? I like I said, my oldest will be 22 soon. My youngest is 17, and I share your fear, kind of like when they leave the nest. You know, it's a tough place. But I think the best advice I give them is, one, to always be who they've been taught to be. I also tell them you never know who's watching you, you know, no matter where you are. So, you know, just to make sure that they're true to themselves, you know, and I know that sounds cliche, but I really, really trust and feel that, you know, with my wife and I's background in faith and just family, and both, you know, being people of color and my parents growing up in the Jim Crow South, and just the values they've instilled in us, I just feel, you know, as long as they hold true to themselves and hold true to the teachings we've given them, then they'll be okay. Now, as far as kind of making it in the world as a young Black man, I tell them, you know, don't bow down to peer pressure, you know, always, no matter what situation you're in, take the high ground and, you know, be polite. And as far as dealing with police, I let them know, you know, I just want you to come home. My oldest is figuring out what it means to be a Black man in America right now. And he's starting to feel that rage that we all get when we realize our place in the world and that we're looked at as less than. And he has his own car, he drives a lot. And I tell him, listen, as annoyed as you may be, or you may feel that you're in the right, they're in the wrong. Yes, sir. Yeah, you know, no, sir. You know, just get home to me, you know?
I hear you. That is good advice. That is excellent advice. I want to make sure I get Sheena to ask whatever question of any panelists, and then Willie, we will end with you. And I want to make sure we're respectful of time. So we each get a minute. Sheena, who do you want to ask?
Can I ask you?
Oh, sure, go.
So, from your perspective, what does Boston, or even the region, need to do, look like, feel like, to be somewhere where Black people can thrive?
It needs to have, I think we need to have representation at every single level, right? And I feel as though, you know, when we look, even with this panel, to hear Beth talk about the parity on boards bill, or to see that we have, you know, individuals making decisions, right, that impact us, and then connectivity, right? It can't just be that we learn, like, wait a minute, there's a Black person that works at insert place, where I'm like, I've never seen that person before. Is that, you know, is that a hologram, or is that a real person of color, like, that we can ask, you know, do you in fact work here? But I think we have a long way to go in certain places, and then in others, I've seen, you know, in my world, Sheena, with electeds, we have a federal, in Ayanna, we have somebody, we have county, myself and Sheriff Tompkins, we have state legislators, we have municipal, and now we're all lining up with each other to say, we need federal, state, and local legislation that says the following, and I can say, and I'm just implementing it tomorrow, right? So what I think we need is far more representation, and we need to be strategic. We need to start talking to each other about, and not just elected stuff, but like when Beth says, who's going to be, you know, again, I know this is all my world, but like judges, right? Who are the judges? Who's going to be dealing with, you know, all of the diversion programs that we're going to be sending people to. Now that I know and have laid eyes on Mswati, I'm like, I want everyone going to Charlestown, right? Like whether they're kids from Charlestown or not, let's get some really excellent people giving wraparound services to all of our kids, or at least using you as something that we can showcase to say to the other places in West Roxbury or other locations, let's look at what the Charlestown Coalition is doing and uphold them. But those are my suggestions. Willie, we're ending with you. 30 seconds. What do you want to ask him? What?
I was going to ask a double. I wanted to ask Beth, as she works with leaders, about self-care. And then I wanted to ask Gina, how do you talk to someone, or what do you say to someone who is not as gregarious as you? And how do you encourage them to connect?
Beth, you go first, and then Sheena,
Sure.
and then we will end.
So self-care, extraordinarily important. We talk a lot about that in the office. I don't think we always do a great job, but I think particularly for people of color, it's important because of just the everyday stress that we take. So personally, I exercise. So I get to the gym at least 3 times a week. My family will not like me if I don't. So I need to go to the gym. That's part of it. I need to occasionally have a glass of wine. That's helpful for me. And I need to have friends that I can vent with. Right. And I go to church. So spirituality is important to me. In our church, at the end, we always say our worship is over. Let our service begin. So being able to really feel like I can bring my spiritual life outside of the building is helpful as well.
I'll just say quickly, one of my favorite books is called Never Eat Alone. And the whole premise of it is you actually don't need to be super extroverted to connect. Just bring people into what you're already doing. So the author of it, when he meets someone, he says, why don't you come to church with me this Sunday? And, and that's how he builds relationships. So I think people really should build one by one and not feel like they have to be like giving out their business card and at a network event. It's like, bring people into what you already are doing in life.
Well, okay. So what I am excited about is we already have some connections that are going to be happening after this call. Part of the thing I want to always end each of these wonderful discussions with is that if you are interested in working with me as an elected official or any of the elected officials that I can rope in and make say yes, right? When you say, hey, we're thinking about this, and Beth, I'm even looking, this parity on boards bill, you have my word that at the next elected of color meeting, we meet every other Friday. I'm going to be mentioning this and saying to, Representative Miranda and El Lugardo and Santiago and others, and the new president of the Black and Latino Caucus, who is from Roxbury, Representative Tyler. What are we doing to make sure that this is happening? How can we amplify this and lift it up? But we need to work together more, right? So continue, go forth, know that we are watching you in the criminal legal field and making sure that we are screaming your praises and proud of you, but we need to band together like a transformer occasionally to say, Rachel, we need you roundhouse kicking doors off on these 3 issues, and I will be there with my, Chuck Norris feet and shoes on. But I'm proud of all 4 of you. Thank you for everything. Beth, you have 2 of my exceptional employees in Lead Boston, Amanda Teo and Charlene. So thank you for that, and keep it up, guys. We're proud of you. Be well.
Thank you.
Thank you.